So, hello everyone. Foundation team presents Foundation, a Martian city-state between ice and fire. The team members are from France and Quebec. A number of them are members of the French branch of the Mars Society. My name is Michel Lamontagne. I'm from Quebec, Canada. And we will first present some slides giving a general overview of a foundation's physical aspect, and then we'll follow with some specific social and economical elements. So, foundation is a city-state that regroups two population poles. One of them is Arcadia, the other is Surya. There's as well a major transportation route, the Meridian Way. Arcadia, to the north, is in the region of Arcadia Planitia. It is named after the mythical Greek domain of Pan, a land of harmony and plenty. On Mars, the source of plenty is the ice. Surya, at the equator, is built deep in the Nicholson crater. It's named after the solar deity in Hinduism. It is the land of fire, or at least relative warmth, in the case of Mars. Arcadia, the city of ice, is Mars's oldest city. In this image, we can see both buildings and equipment as well as a surface transportation tube. The buildings are mostly vertical pressure vessels buried deep underground for radiation protection. The upper sections house parks and public areas. The ice lurks just a few inches beneath the surface. Its proximity is the reason Arcadia Planitia was chosen for the first landing on Mars, and ice remains a fundamental resource for the foundation city-state. In Arcadia, we can start visiting with the Robobar. We can see that automation is really implemented everywhere. It is impossible to predict the level of automation that will have reached by the time Arcadia is a reality, but we know that a high level of automation will be needed to provide the predictivity required for settlement expansion. The Robobar may be a novelty item, but it highlights the idea that many tasks will be done by robots and automated systems, working in the shadows. Between Robobars, self-driving trucks, we're not really planning for many truck drivers on Mars. The bar we see here is a lot closer to a German beer garden than a classic downtown bar. But well, we don't expect Martians to be very nostalgic for concrete. In Arcadia, or Northern City, we'll find the History Museum, where the city-state honors the memory of its founders. There's an historical narrative being built up around the founders of the city-state. It's evolving, bolstering the Martian identity. In the astronomical section of the museum that we see here, we have landers, habitats, probes, and if you look very carefully, you'll find Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster. Well, Musk did say that the finders could be keepers, and the Martian people took up the challenge and brought it back to Mars. The Meridian Way, 2,200 kilometers of mostly dirt road. This self-driving utility vehicle that we see is one of many types of machines that will follow the Meridian Way. Although the principles of autonomy and autarky will not favor large-scale inter-settlement commerce on the surface, movements and trade will nevertheless be significant, and the Meridian Way will see quite a bit of traffic. As we move down along the Meridian Way, we approach Surya, and fields of solar panels stretch out endlessly, with silos on the horizon that store methane and oxygen, and house most of the heavy industries. Anyone from the plains in the States should be right at home here watching this kind of view. There's a robotic cleaner based on a modified large-scale irrigation machine that keeps the panels dust-free. Robotic assemblers build continuous bands of arrays, laying them down in large circular patterns. Surya is designed to maximize the use of natural sunlight, with the development of orbital mirrors to increase average illumination surface construction has become as viable as underground habitats. Life in Syria, as in Arcadia, or northern part of the foundation city-state, depends on water. This it gets from ice deposits in the nearby Medusae Phocea. Radiation protection is quite light in public areas, but we use massive amounts of regolith to protect the private spaces where people will spend most of their time. Visiting Syria, we can enter Main Street. Life support here is not a service, it is a right. We can see the main street of Syria's shopping district, which is modeled after Edinburgh's Princes Street in Scotland. Large fans move air and spread the heat around. Water and air production compensates for unavoidable leaks. On Mars, life support may be a right, but life support maintenance is also a civic duty. In Syria, let's visit a local park where the Martians practice their favorite activity, walking. On Mars, walking is a way of life and a way to counter the effects of the lower gravity. There is as much going on underground as on the ground. Much of the city's infrastructure is hidden below the parks and pedestrian ways in the lower sections of the tubular pressure vessels. At night, one can always have a pleasant visit into Syria's Red's pub, where live hard and party hard might be a slogan for them. Mars is still a frontier, even at 1 million people, and although gentrified, it can be a hard life, certainly an intense life. So letting off steam, in particular in a society still dominated by young adults, is part of the Martian way. Syria will have greenhouses, surface greenhouses. Humanity couldn't move to Mars alone. We feel it had to bring all of life with it. As we realize that sustainable life on Earth requires a diverse ecosystem, we can project that the same will hold true for Mars, in particular, as we aim for complete independence. Hydroponics and vat-grown foods may do for a time, but long-term sustainability will require diversity, and plants grown in soil will provide that. In Syria, we now look at the tent system. In the image we see, the tent system is built over the existing botanical gardens. The tent, an early form of shell world, aims to make Mars's actual surface suitable for life, rather than just the inside of the habitats. Wires anchored to the ground hold down a flexible glass and steel membrane held up by air pressure. The technology only allows for low internal pressure, just a few pascals, but that is enough to keep a lake from evaporating and eventually to bring life to native Martian soil. We see that and we feel that Earth needs Mars as a backup, as a goal, and as a dream. And now let's move up to orbit and to Phobos. Phobos, where the Albatross, the Martian-built STO, demonstrate how invention is the lifeblood of a Martian society. The development of the Albatross single-stage to orbit rocket has been a great achievement for Martian industry. It's a relatively small vehicle, but that just shows that the requirements for making Mars orbit are much lower than the ones for Earth, giving Mars advantages that we will be exploring a little later in the presentation. We can see that at 21 meters long, 25 wide, and 30 tons, we're not speaking of a very large vehicle here. Phobos Space Terminal 1, to infinity and beyond. Buzz Lightyear's slogan fits Terminal 1 quite well. It's a grand architectural and technological gesture, a statement that Mars alone is not enough. Water ice, deep from Phobos' interior, supports a fuel production infrastructure that reduces transportation costs significantly. And with Phobos crossing the sky regularly, Martians keep their eyes to the sky and to the great beyond. Foundation, its Martian identity, can be summed up with this slogan: don't wait for it to come from Earth, just make it here. It may be a slogan, but self-reliance, creativity, and cooperation will be essential on Mars. So here you have it, an overview of our city-state, foundations, where ideas are a way of life. And now, let's look at some of the numbers and ideas behind this grand design. First, we'll pop through the high-level political principles, energy mix, questions of agriculture, production, economic activity, and space operations. Foundation, the high-level political principles. This is politics, so we'll cover all the words carefully. Local by essence, direct to democracy, so subsidiary, so delegation to the local space, and autonomy at the level of the districts, which cover about 10,000 citizens in our cities of 500,000 people each. When danger is close and shared, decision-making should also be close and shared. We look also to the right to life support, where life support on Mars is free and inalienable, with pressure, oxygen, water, radiation-free space, and all the basics. Because living outside on Mars is just not an option. Foundation is one of the city-states on Mars. There are others, which we do not describe. And between these city-states, there is the balance of prudence, a planet-wide tacit agreement on weapon use. Because what should be an instinctive choice when the rupture of a pressure vessel results in basically genocide and ecocide. There's a fragility on Mars that needs to be respected. And finally, the dual work system, where something like 50% of unpaid civic work is balanced with paid private work. Because ecosystem maintenance is just too important to be outsourced to anybody. So it is entrusted to everybody. The next thing we're looking at is Foundation's energy mix. It's quite variable, with solar following the sun, of course, and with a significant baseload nuclear. This baseload nuclear depends on uranium, which comes from Earth, as we don't think we have found sufficient uranium on Mars. So the uranium from Earth is stored in a 10-year strategic stockpile, just in case something goes wrong on our planet, and gives us 10 years on Mars to turn things around and become totally independent. This dependency sits very badly with the Martians, and we expect that solar energy will increase to encourage these independent purposes, while the research for uranium resources or thorium goes on. The solar energy spreads rather like a forest, with automatic factories called autofabs that cover the areas of us around our cities with solar panels. Methane, oxygen storage has become so huge and strategic that methane is the ultimate currency of Mars. In Syria, we have an interesting opportunity, since it's a very deep crater with walls many kilometers in difference of height, for pumped storage hydro. And so this has been implemented at a large scale, allowing for Syria to have an interesting curve of storage and reuse of energy. Foundations agriculture. Artificial lighting in agriculture has to be quite high, easily 300 watts per meter square of average illumination. This requires large amounts of energy, and whatever the method we use, this lighting has to be provided. or equivalent energies of other methods. There are three main types of sources: bioreactors for protein, underground grow rooms, and augmented light greenhouses, which get extra lighting from orbital mirrors that focus onto the growing areas. Multiple levels in grow rooms would reduce floor space, but not necessarily energy demand. Bioreactors for yeast, algae, or mononuclear bacteria have high artificiality, a very low diversity, and extremely high yield. Still, they remain a speculative food source, so we certainly don't want our settlement to depend on them. Grow rooms with hydroponic, aeroponics, and artificially lit areas are another interesting solution. They require a lot of power and active cooling and can be considered medium artificiality with high yield again, but low diversity. They're also known as vertical farming. Greenhouses require careful controls and active deployment of insulations for night and moving elements. Their yields would be lower, the power would be lower, but eventually we'll have more diverse soil and life, and we see them as more sustainable and someday exportable to the Martian surface. Here again is a view of the foundation tent concept, where anchored cables and hold back a flexible pressure membrane. This allows, in the first use of it, surface water and eventually surface agriculture. Foundation production. Food production, about 1 ton or more per year per person. And a fair part of this, of course, returns to biomass through recuperation. Biomass itself is even higher in production than the food and is returned to the production system. We can see that more than half of the power is consumed to produce food, biomass, and for example, as well, solar panels, and locally produced nuclear reactors, which are a use of energy to make the energy. Again, foundation production is based on a growing society where 1 million people is not the end, but something just along the way. Water at 75,000 tons per year and 40 petajoules per year for production may not be a great power use, but it's certainly one of the most important elements of production. You can see the energy in the table where lighting, for example, is required. Propellant production for 1 million individuals is way down from the energy ratio of early settlements, where it was at least half. Steel and concrete show the continuing expansion, where a non-expanding society would need much lower levels of production. Service for heating, cooling, and transportation, and still a large amount for all the other elements that we can see in the production diagram. Sorry?
5 minutes left.
5 minutes left, thank you. Foundation economy and activity for 1 million people with a gross domestic product of the order of $150,000 per people and per capita of obviously $150,000 per capita, with interplanetary commerce reaching $100 billion per year and energy per capita 160 gigajoules per year, which is something like 4 or 5 times what we find on Earth. But of course on Earth, we profit from the fact that nature takes most of this and provides us with food. On Mars, we have to make all of that energy. Foundation exports and investment. Again, tourism is a large part of this. The knowledge economy with patents and licensing. The space services for the expansion into the rest of the solar system. A large amount of money in real estate, as we expect the growth of Mars to produce a lot of interest in people who want to invest their money in a growing proposition. As well, rare earth metals are part of the export system through the solar system. Tourism, here we see an extract of Lucy's sketchbook, a character we used in our report, to give a viewpoint of a Terran journalist exploring certain elements of the Martian society. As a visitor, she adds a few hundred thousands to billions of dollars expected to be spent by tourists in our city-state. Sports at 0.38 G, we don't really have that much data, but we presume 0.38 G is livable for the long term. Results on plants using the European modular cultivation system on the ISS have shown promising results for Martian levels of gravity. Exercise will be an important part of daily routines. Dance, sports, and just walking will be omnipresent in Martian lives. The Culture Foundation is an evolving culture with words that come over time, new vocabularies, the matdans, which would be the Martian word for potatoes, methanox, the type of fuel, and other words of interest for the vocabulary of this new society. The Albatross's SSTO operations will combine with space liners that make the round trips from Earth to Mars. The Albatross SSTO will do atmospheric operations and arrive at Earth with half-full tanks, reducing fueling needs from 5 transports from the surface to 2. And propellant from production on Phobos has a tiny amount of delta V compared to other ones. So the Albatross offers an interesting road to the belt for its maximal reusability, local operations, simple operations, and cheap satellite launches for Earth's geosynchronous orbits. All this makes the Albatross a means for Martians to expand towards the asteroid belt and to open new horizons for this growing society. Sorry. So credits, everyone that worked on everything, but specifically Laurent Gauthier was the Power Systems and Humanist Society guru, Florent Bennecker, our webmaster, Carl Van Baer, our real estate specialist, Olivier Gourdon, the graphic designer, and Lucy's soul, Michel Lamontagne, designer of Surya, Remy Navarro, the designer of Arcadia, Jean-Marc Soletti, professor and Albatross designer, and Lucy, our intrepid journalist, for which you can see the report through the website and the barcode in this image. So someday perhaps we will see subscribe now and 45 Mars cranes for the planet scope of Arcadia and Surya, a dream come true, also available on all of Moon's stations. Thank you to the Mars Society for providing us with the opportunity to showcase our work, for creating this contest as a fun and rewarding way to think about Mars in the future, for the advocacy for Mars, and for the dream of another world. Thank you all, keep safe, and we're ready for questions.
Is it my turn?
Robert?
Yes, I just want some clarification on your transportation system. You showed a small single stage to orbit vehicle. Is that the same as your interplanetary vehicle? And what propellants does it, or if there's 2 different ones, what do they use?
They all use methane and oxygen. The little vehicle is for mostly orbital transportation locally. There are larger vehicles used from Phobos back to Earth, but the small vehicle can reach Earth orbit, and in particular can reach Earth geostationary orbit, where it can provide transportation of geosynchronous satellites at an interesting cost.
Okay, and where do you get methane on Phobos?
Well, we got the methane on Phobos from a paper which we can give the reference to, where the authors summarize that that methane would be accessible from deep inside, not methane itself, of course, but from deep inside Phobos. The resources were available there. It's one paper. We hope they're right.
Menosos, you want to ask a question?
Yes?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'd like to ask you which way of transportation is your choice from transporting all the gear you need to do the settlement from Earth to Mars? Or if more than one, just say some words about it.
Oh, the transportation. Well, it would start with something like Starship and possibly evolve. If the nuclear reactors become available, they could evolve towards something using nitrogen or argon from Mars as a propellant for an electrical nuclear drive. Or if solar becomes really light, it might give an alternative for the drive, as this would be a mostly orbital spaceship. It's not the most important part of our design. We're really concentrated on the city in the sense that we felt that the transportation system, well, was pretty well covered by Elon Musk already. Although anybody else that comes up with a good system, we'd love to use it.
Samer, then Kyle, if we have time.
Sorry?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lamontagni, for your presentation. I was really impressed by this one. Please, if you could just highlight on the habitable zones of the residential parts and what are the measures taken for the anti-radiation, for keeping them, protecting them from radiation. If you just kindly please highlight on this part.
I'm sorry, the voice is breaking down. I didn't understand the question.
Okay, let me repeat it again. I was just inquiring about the residential zone, and the habitable part. If you
Yes.
could just kindly highlight on this part, and what are the measures taken for protecting these parts against radiation? Thank you.
Oh, okay. So we have a little backup slide for this. Can I?
Jay, how much time's left?
Here we go. So here you see a cutaway view, for example, of the horizontal tube. I think it's obvious for the vertical version of the tubes. We just go deep and have people sleep at the bottom. In this case, we have a very thick, 5-meter thick concrete top. The whole floor is basically rock. And then we have livable areas. This is you have the public space, and the public space is not highly protected against radiation, but we don't expect you to spend most of your time there. The private space will be protected by at least 5 meters of regolith and provide the protection required. The walls are quite thick, at least 1 meter. And as we expect people to sleep on Mars, just as on Earth, at least 1/3 of their time, and then spend another 1/3 of their time in offices or workspace that are protected, and another large part of their time with other people in protected spaces. The fact that public spaces are open and light and not overly radiation protected does not seem to us all that significant.
Thank you. That's time.
Thank you, Michelle. That's time.
Okay, so I close off. Next one.
Yes, sir.
Okay.